Today we are looking at Superman for the SEGA Genesis. Superman was released by Sunsoft on the SEGA Genesis in 1992. Sunsoft made an effort at a Superman video game in 1992. That appears to be a wise decision at first. After all, Sunsoft created several respectable Batman games, including 2 fantastic NES games. And they also created a lot of other well-liked games in general, such as Blaster Master. But for reasons that will likely never be understood by a current generation, Superman and video games seem to be a lethal combination. Every time the Man of Steel is attempted to be incorporated into a video game, it appears like the outcome is subpar at best. I've played a few Superman games in the past, but only the Death and Return of Superman on the Super Nintendo, also on the SEGA Genesis, and the Superman arcade games seems to be the best Superman games from that current generation. Although by no means they were excellent, they were still an okay playthrough. So, how is Superman today? Here is our review of Superman for the SEGA Genesis. The plot of Superman is rather generic because you are given generic goals in each level, such as finding missing children, finding missing people, and finding missing Lois Lane. Yes, finding Lois Lane is a generic goal, especially if you've been doing this as frequently as Superman has. Even though you do battle a variety of Superman's villains, like the Prankster, Brainiac, and Metallo, until the very end of the game they really don't connect. Brainiac is the game's major villain, as he appears to be taunting you every time you receive a game over. You get a brief cutscene at the beginning of each level with Superman, he's changing into Superman, and there's an article saying there's missing children or Lois Lane is missing. That's about as in-depth the story is. The game's major problems are best known in its opening level, which doesn't actually get any better as the game goes on. The controls are difficult to use, which at the very first thing, A button activates the superpower. More or less, it's going to be the Super Punch, although additional powers will be available depending on the situation. And B activates Superman's jab, slow and delayed, making you open to attacks. And C activates the jump. Yes, that's accurate. Superman, the one who can run as fast as he can jump, but he just does not fly. The Superman arcade game and the Death and Return of Superman are 2 occasions of side-scrolling games I've played with Superman, and both of them feature Superman having the ability to fly. Superman is able to fly even in the Justice League Task Force game that would be released on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, but in this game he just cannot fly in the side-scrolling level platform sections of the game, although he can jump higher and reach distance locations because of his super jump, but he just cannot fly in these levels. But in the later levels, they do allow Superman to fly. In fact, the game's final third act consists primarily of Superman soaring around and shooting things up with his heat ray vision. However, that's the problem. The early stages only features flight as a transition, so you have to work hard to preserve through them. You are still constrained to using thermal vision in that sense as well. This is the place where you can only use one superpower at a time. When you're not flying around, you're generally forced to use the Super Punch. You can switch between the Super Punch and a spinning motion that is required to you to drill through the floor in order to reveal a different area of the level by collecting icons. Additionally, the game kindly indicates where to drill with a bright yellow spin this sign in case you become confused about where to perform the spinning move. Superman isn't really impressive in the graphics department. While all the sprites are nicely created and gracefully animated, the level designs is a little bit lackluster. They just strike me as being generally uninteresting and bland. Since most levels take place in darker tunnels and corridors, it appears like all the color was contained to the first level. there was definitely room for improvement in terms of the graphics. The game was capable of much better graphics for the SEGA Genesis. I have to say it that I rather enjoy the game's music. It doesn't sound quite as dramatic and doesn't exactly match the Superman story, but it is still kinda catchy. Superman's soundtrack manages to impress for the most part, even though it does start to deteriorate a little as you advance through the game. So yeah, Superman's soundtrack is quite enjoyable, and the sound effects are about as good as they get on the Genesis without putting a lot of work into it. This title would have been one of those that goes overlooked and buried beneath the pile of forgotten games if it had been a typical generic game. Only those with some patience will be able to overcome the game's serious defective mechanics because of its gameplay and control issues. The game could have been good, but is only Metacore at best. The game's main problem is that you play as the Man of Steel under the Superman name and branding. In this regard, the game feels miserable to produce a game that is deserving of the Man of Steel name. Failing to fully realize Superman's potential and depriving him of many of the most well-known skills to the point where he plays absolutely nothing like the character he's supposed to be based on. And this game is hard, and I mean it's pretty hard. You get one life and only 2 continues, and there are no saves or passwords. Although you can get more continues along the way after you get so many points, but still they should have gave you some checkpoints or some more lives. While Superman on the Genesis isn't necessarily among the worst video games ever created, its broken gameplay and poor design don't help the situation. The Death and Return of Superman is probably your best option if you're desperate in need of a solid Superman game for the Genesis. The Superman game is still far better than this. Superman for the SEGA Genesis is getting a 5 out of 10. What did you think about Superman for the SEGA Genesis? Please leave comments below to share your thoughts. That would do it for this episode. We do live streams throughout the week, mostly games from the Xbox or the Nintendo Switch, and we also do retro games throughout the week as well. And remember, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up for your support. Thank you for watching, and I will see you here on the next episode. Have a great day.